Good evening, everyone, and welcome back. I would say welcome to Red True Crime, but this is my other venture. I know history, or do I? Yes. So, this particular episode I'm going into because it both covers history and actual crime. Um, so, before I go into what we're going to talk about tonight, reparations in California, which is crazy because you don't think about slavery in California. But before we go into that, welcome to the intro. All right, I'm back. Thanks again. So, this particular channel, I know history or do I, is going to basically it's going to be me telling you history stories that we all think to be true, but we could actually not know them to be true. Like, we could be under one assumption of what it is and it could be something completely different. So, case in point, um today it came out that a city in California has actually made legislation to have reparations to descendants of slaves in California. And I was like, wait a minute. Because when you think of slavery, you don't think of it out in California. You don't even think of it in Texas. You will pretty much think of it in the southern states like Virginia, West Virginia, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi. You think of those states. You do not think of California. I mean, granted, they had, Asians, Chinese mostly working on the railroads, but, installing those. They had Hispanics, they had Native Americans all working the railroad, but these people weren't slaved. At least I didn't think they were. So when I saw this legislation being passed, I was like, I'm about to delve into this because, I didn't even think, I mean, the person, my significant other, he was like, wait a minute, I didn't even know about that. So we were talking about that. So let's get into this. So, you know, y- most of you growing up, if any of you paid attention to history whatsoever, you know that California entered the Union as a free state in 1850. And this comes part of some legislation that was being passed where for every slave state there was, you had to have a free state because they were trying to keep a balance together, which ended up being one of the main reasons why we had the Civil War in 1861 when it started because slavery was such a hot button issue, and you had people who wanted it and you had people who thought it was unconstitutional. And as we now know, slavery is a crime. It's a moral crime, it's an ethical crime, and it's an actual crime because you still have people today enslaving people and, you know, treating them no better than what was going on in the 1800s. So let's go from there. So in 1850, now that's when California became a free state and it had no history of slavery. But that's a myth because, like I said, I was convinced that there was no slavery out there. So slavery thrived there in various forms for centuries, from indigenous forced labor under the Spanish missions to African American chattel slavery during the gold rush, and even lingering systems after the Civil War. So, in this video, we're going to break it down chronologically, uncover the key events and people, and bring it up to present day with California's groundbreaking reparations efforts as the early 2026. This is a heavy but important story that challenges what we think we know about the Golden State. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, and we're going to get into it. So, this whole video is launching from my Facebook page, my personal Facebook page, because I don't have a Facebook page for the I Know History or Do I, but I do have a YouTube channel. And if you look at the ticker that's going across the bottom of the screen, you will see the URL for the YouTube channel. So please, please, please go there, subscribe. I've already got a few other videos on there, one on eugenics, one on the two Johnsons. It's interesting one. So yeah, definitely go to I Know History or Do I on YouTube and subscribe and like and share and all that good stuff. 'Cause once I get enough subscribers on that, I can actually do lives from that channel and add more to it. But right now, I'm kinda doing it ground, you know, just on the ground, getting it started here. So, the very, very beginning, before Europeans arrived, California's indigenous people, over 300,000 of them across hundreds of tribes, had diverse cultures without large-scale chattel slavery. Captives from wars were sometimes integrated, but it wasn't hereditary or race-based. So you understand that. They did not look at another tribe and look at them and say, "Okay, you're less than me. We're going to enslave you because we think you're less than." No. This was literally slavery was happening because they would go battle it out for XYZ reason, and whoever they caught alive, they turned into slaves. So, everything changed in 1769 when Spanish colonists, led by Father Junípero Serra, established the first mission in San Diego. Over the next decade, 21 missions were built along the coast, and the Spanish forcibly relocated and baptized over 90,000 native Californians, confining them to mission compounds for forced labor in farming, building, and crafts. So conditions were horrific: whippings, family separations, locked dormitories for women, and diseases that wiped out populations. Rebellions like the 1824 Chumash uprising were crushed brutally. So historians call this mission slavery. Natives couldn't leave, received no pay, and faced cultural erasure, which is something they still deal with today. The cultural erasing part. And by the 1830s, the indigenous numbers had plummeted. So after Mexico's independence in 1821, missions were secularized in 1834, turning lands into huge ranchos, but forced labor continued. So former mission Indians became debt peons on these estates, bound by unfair debts. So as I'm talking about this, you're like, okay, wait a minute. Where do the African slaves come into play here? Because all you're talking about are the indigenous people, and they're not getting reparations. So what's going on here? I'm gonna get to it. So Mexico abolished slavery in 1829, but in remote California, it was barely enforced. So understand that. California was not did not become a state until 1850. So we are talking like almost roughly a little more than 20 years between the time they abolished it and the time California became a state. So there was just a lot of lawlessness in the area. So when Mexico abolished slavery in 1829, American settlers started arriving, some bringing enslaved African Americans. So there you have it. That's where the black slave trade started merging west. Then came the gold rush. In 1848, gold was discovered and California's population exploded. Southern migrants brought hundreds, estimates about 500 to 1,500 enslaved black people to mine gold. So as you see this gentleman here in the picture, he's one of those people and he's mining gold. Meanwhile, indigenous slavery exploded, and the 1850 California law, ironically called the Act for the Government and Protection of Indians, legalized indenturing Native people, often through kidnappings. So, thousands of Native children were sold as apprentices. Violence was rampant, and Native populations dropped from 150,000 to 30,000 by 1870. That is a massive, massive decline. Now, California becomes a state in 1850 as part of the compromise, the Missouri Compromise, free in name but with loopholes. The Constitution banned slavery, but a fugitive slave law allowed owners to keep people brought before statehood. So, pro slavery focus was strong. Enslaved people like Biddy Mason were brought by Mormon settlers in 1856. She won freedom in court and became a successful landowner in Los Angeles. The famous Archie Lee case in 1858, an enslaved man from Mississippi escaped in Sacramento. After dramatic trials, public support from San Francisco's free black community helped him win freedom, but he fled to Canada amid threats. So, I guess that you've got the people who really want the freedom for the slaves, and you've got the ones that are like, no, we need them for whatever reason. back and forth. I mean, it was even going on back in the 1820s. So Chinese immigrants are also faced indentured coolie labor and sex trafficking, leading to racist laws. So during the Civil War, California stayed Union, which means um, the North. And the 13th Amendment ended slavery nationwide in 1865. But unfree labor lingered. Convict leasing for natives until the 1930s. So what happens once slavery actually ended? That's when they started bringing convicts from prisons and treating them like slaves, and they weren't even getting paid a normal wage. They were getting paid below, like, the bare minimum. So, it was just a tiny step above slavery. So, the legacy, genocide of indigenous peoples, wealth built on exploitation, and ongoing disparities. Black Californians face wealth gaps, um, redlining echoes, and more. But change is coming. In 2020, amid national protests, California created the first state reparations task force. Their 2023 report detailed harms and recommended over 100 remedies, including potential payments. Progress has been incremental. Governor Newsom signed a formal apology in 2024. In October 2025, he signed 5 key bills, including SB 518, creating the Bureau for Descendants of American Slavery, the nation's first permanent agency for reparations. It handles genealogy verification, education, and program coordination. So that's going to be a huge undertaking right there. Another bill funded CSU research on proving descendant status. Okay. So Newsom vetoed some direct payment proposals and citing budgets and legal hurdles like Proposition 209. Advocates are pushing for more in 2026. But here's the thing that has made the news here lately. Locally, San Francisco created a reparations fund in late 2025, signed by Mayor Daniel Lurie. It could implement ideas like lump sum payments. Now, one of the proposals was a $5 million payment per eligible person. $1 million. That's crazy. But here's the thing. There's no funding for it yet. And there's really no plan on how to get it funded. But that's huge. That is absolutely huge because this is the first time you see. I mean, you would see some reparations here and there, for like, you had some colleges that were around during the time of slavery that actually had slaves and they were buried on campus grounds. And the descendants of them, they've paid those descendants, but we're talking like 20 people in certain situations. This could potentially be a lot of people and a lot of money going to descendants of people who were enslaved and in California at that time. The precedent is unreal. And, when you hear about the reparations, people going on about reparations for slaves, that this has been, I mean, I've been hearing about this my entire life. I don't disagree with it, but I don't know how you would handle it, how where the money would come from. I mean, the things that have happened to people that were brought here unwillingly is atrocious. I look at, you look at the indigenous people of the US. We settlers from other countries came in, took over their land and murdered and pillaged and enslaved them. And they're now on reservations and whatnot, and that's not enough. I mean, they deserve a lot more than that. Um, People who were indentured servants, like the Irish, the Chinese, it's slavery, but they had a choice when they became I mean, like, how can you say that? Well, I mean, because it's either poverty or whatever. I mean, and I get it. I mean, it's a hell of a choice, but it's not true slavery unless they sign a contract to be an indentured servant, and once they meet the needs of the contract and they're not allowed out, that's when you go into full blown kidnapping, slavery, whatnot. But there's a lot to this. I mean, this is you've got I look at it as when people do things like this, like, it's never gonna happen, and then one little small area passes something, and it's like, "Okay, there's precedent right there." And that can be used as an argument for reparations elsewhere in the country. Like, there has been an ongoing argument about reparations for Black Wall Street, the, Tulsa, Oklahoma race riots that happened in the 1920s. Um, I cannot think of a more clear-cut case for reparations than that situation, and they're still fighting it 100 years later, they're still fighting for it, and I don't understand that because Oklahoma even brought in historians and they did this big, massive report, they investigated everything, and every person in that report said reparations is reasonable, reparations should happen, but yet they still keep fighting it, and I don't understand that. So they need to pay the descendants of the Tulsa Black Wall Street, they need to pay them. Truly believe they need to pay them. Um, Knowing this information about California, if they can figure out how to do it, they can get it funded and they can prove the genealogy, pay these people because I think there's just been enough torture and misery going around for all people, and they need to be paid. These are one of the arguments that African Americans have today saying, "We were enslaved, we were forced here, and we were never given a chance to thrive." And, I can't argue with that. But you're talking 200 years later and you're still feeling that way. You personally were not enslaved and forced to never, not thrive. That's silly. But reasonable payments, for catastrophic things that happened to your ancestors, I'm not opposed to that. I'm not. They just gotta figure it out. So, yeah, we've got that. There you go. San Francisco now has a reparations fund. So good luck to everybody who's applying for it. I hope they get you funded, and I mean, I'm shocked. I did not know slavery existed on that level in California. I did not know that. So I learned something today too. All right. So I'm gonna hop off here. Um, Thank you for those of you that are on Facebook that have tuned into this. I really appreciate it. And if you get a moment, please go to my YouTube channel for the history page. I know history, or do I? Subscribe, like, share, comment, all that good stuff. And thank you again. And this is Rebecca from Red True Crime. And now I know history, or do I? Bye, everybody.